What is up, everyone? November 23rd edition of the Fantasy Fanatics MMA podcast. I am James Lynch. He is JHK. Why are we here an hour early? Well, once again, we've switched the time here. It's always unpredictable here on the Fantasy Fanatics MMA podcast. But if you never watched the show before, basically we preview an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition of the show, we're going to be talking about the really interesting heavyweight matchup taking place in the main event of UFC Fight Night, December 18th. Derrick Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus. But before we get into that, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Also, make sure you download the Fantasy Fanatics MMA app. And if you have any questions, post them in the chat. We'll get to them as soon as we're done the breakdown. We like to stick it to the top of the topic of the fight or the heavyweight division, but whatever. We got lots of time. We can talk about whatever you guys want. There's no UFC this weekend, so no underdog picks. And yeah, there we go. Let's get into how we got here, John, as we usually do when it comes to our fights. And how we got here was Derrick Lewis lost his last fight. Otherwise, Derrick Lewis would be fighting Francis Ngannou. He'd be getting that rematch. He loses to Cyril Gane. Cyril Gane finishes Derrick Lewis. And Chris Daukaus, who has been, I think, on one of the most underrated tears in the UFC right now. I mean, you look at what Israel Adesanya did, with his rise, signing with the UFC, and then working his way to getting a middleweight title shot. I mean, the fact that Chris Daukaus is just a few fights in, I shouldn't say a few, he's had a couple fights, and for him to have this opportunity to fight Derrick Lewis, that just speaks volumes of how talented he is, and a really good opportunity here to put himself in the contender spot against a guy like Derrick Lewis. So just first your thoughts on the matchup itself, and then we'll dig into this, both fighters.
I was kind of surprised for this matchup when it was announced, because really it was announced before it was actually signed. You know how that happens a lot of the times. But I don't think they were trying to like push Chris to sign the contract, or were they trying to push Derrick Lewis to sign the contract? I have no idea. But this fight was put together, I believe, like a week after they announced it. And man, I think both these guys are incredible talents, and we're going to see a crazy main event, man. Guys that are like in different trajectories in their career or stages in their career meeting. I always love that.
I was also surprised, and I should just mention this and we'll dig into it, in the sense that, like, for Lewis to take this fight, like, obviously Daukaus is going to be like, yeah, sign me up, I'll fight Derrick Lewis. I mean, that's a huge opportunity, big name. But for Lewis, it's like, you know, where is he mentally at this point, right? He's had a couple opportunities at he fought Cormier, obviously, for the title. He fought Gane in the last fight for the interim title. He's not young, right? Like, not that the division's young itself, but you got to wonder what his thinking is. Like, I think like my sort of thinking when Lewis lost that fight was, okay, he'll fight like another veteran and then like just kind of have these fun fights, and maybe if things go well, he goes on another run here. But I didn't see him fighting like a Daukaus or a Tom Aspinall or someone like that that's an up-and-comer. So from that perspective, I was surprised. As far as the UFC announcing the fight early, this is classic UFC. They did the same thing to Al Iaquinta when he fought Bobby Green. They put it on the broadcast, and I was like, hold on a second, I haven't signed anything. So it's the UFC, I think, just being in it's, you know what, not to get too deep into this, but it's UFC just basically saying, we have all the power here, we're going to do whatever we want. And if you don't sign it, because here's what happens, sometimes they release fights from the UFC does, and then sometimes they don't materialize, and then you get all these fans turning on them. You never hear the UFC get crap about that. It's always the fighter if the fight doesn't work out. Case in point, remember a couple of years ago, it was supposed to be Masvidal and Nick Diaz. That never ended up happening, even though, the guy who's fed the news is a partner of the UFC. But anyways, that's another podcast for another day. Let's get into it right here. And by the way, one of the things I love about doing this podcast is our man Michael over at the All-Star doing a phenomenal job when it comes to the tail of the tape and everything you need. Like, there is not a better, and I'm not even saying this because, I work for them, but there is no better site when it comes to, outlining an upcoming fight. Like, honestly, all the big sites, you name them. We don't need to name them all here, but I mean, look at this. They've got everything. The odds up here. They've got the tail of the tape. Like, does anything look this clean on the web right now other than the All-Star? It doesn't. I mean, this is phenomenal. We're going to go through all this, obviously, but just wanted to give a shout out to Mike and everyone else over there at the All-Star. They make our job so easy. So like I mentioned, December 18th, the fight's going to take place in the main event, 5-round fight. So that'll be interesting, although Lewis has been in those situations before. You'll see right now the odds have Chris Daukaus as a slight favorite. Here at -125 on some of the books. Lewis the underdog, which we'll get into maybe why that is. But the tail of the tape here, Derrick Lewis, 36 years old. Chris Daukaus, 32, which is interesting, right? Like, you almost think that Daukaus is younger than that just because, he is sort of new and he's an up-and-comer, but 32's not that young, but it's also for heavyweight. It's like you might as well be 18, right, in that weight class.
Yeah.
Lewis 36. Here's a big difference, though. The fights, 34 fights for Derrick Lewis, 15 for Daukaus. Although Daukaus is he's earned this shot. I don't think there's any denying that. 25 wins to 12, 8 losses to 3 losses. 20 knockouts. I mean, you won't find a better resume in the UFC. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a better resume in the UFC than Lewis when it comes to knockouts. 10 knockouts for Daukaus. both win by submission. Although it should be pointed out, Daukaus has got a really good ground game, based off the gym he comes from. 84% finish rate, 92% finish rate for Daukaus. Now, a lot of people may look at that and think, how is that possible? Lewis has more fights and he has double the knockouts and everything, but it's also the fact that, Daukaus has had less fights. So, and he's actually finished them. So there's less of a sample size, more of an opportunity for him to finish. And I think people forget too, JHK, that Derrick Lewis has had a bunch of decisions. In fact, he had a terrible decision against Francis Ngannou a couple of years ago. I was at that fight. Gosh, that was terrible. And then tail to tape here, 6'3" apiece, so no height advantage either way. Slight reach advantage for Derrick Lewis at 79 compared to 76 for Chris Daukaus. So there we go. And then, like we see again, this is so easy. I just read all this. Significant 4-year age difference. Lewis has a 3-inch reach advantage, and obviously the experience as well. And then let's look at Derrick Lewis's last couple fights. We'll start with him first. We mentioned the loss to Cyril Gane. The Curtis Blaydes win. That was a huge win for him. Although it's got to be pointed out, Blaydes won that first round. I mean, I think Blaydes, had he not made that mistake, he probably would have won that fight. And that's not throwing any shade at Lewis. I just think that Lewis, he's always got that threat of the knockout. And that's something to consider. Beat Oleinik in a fight where he actually, early on in that fight, he didn't look amazing, but did get it done. Beat Latifi by decision, not a great performance. Beat Ivanov by decision, another close fight, not a great performance here. So it's really the last couple fights that the Blaydes and Oleinik fight that he's really turned it up. But those Latifi and Ivanov fights, I remember watching those being like, is this kind of the sign of Derrick Lewis maybe, taking a step back here? But he proved that wrong, obviously, in the Blaydes matchup as well. Just your thoughts on Derrick Lewis and what he has left in his UFC career at this point.
I think he still has a lot left in his career. The reason why I say that is because Derrick Lewis is not shy about telling you that he fights for money. And that's why he fights. He doesn't care about like what's going on with other fighters. And he's been really loose with that. So I see him fighting until like they drag him out the octagon. So he's going to fight everybody in the rankings. I think it doesn't matter who it is. He gets paid the same, especially if it's a main event. When you look at the performances against was it Imanov and Latifi, you're right, man. Everybody thought this dude is on a downward spiral. Even though he got those wins, they were rough wins, right? They weren't like easy. And then he comes back and knocks out Oleinik and Blaydes back to back. The power, man, that's just like the X factor for Lewis. Is Lewis one-dimensional? You can say it. You can say that, but that one dimension could kill everybody in the division, right? And we've seen it land over and over and over again. He's entertaining. I think the UFC will never let him go. He's a guy that, draws a lot of attention from, especially Houston, man. I think Houston and Texas is one of the states that the UFC wants fighters to come out of because they're going to hold events there. How many events did they hold this year? Like more than any other state besides,
I think so, yeah,
Las Vegas, right? So he's a big driving force. You got little younger guys coming up like Adrian Yanez, but you don't got a heavyweight like Derrick Lewis. I think he's still got it, and I love watching him fight. Even though he does have some terrible like lackluster decisions, but still that X factor is so important for him.
I think the other key thing here is I'd say there's two guys in the heavyweight division right now, and maybe I'm off base by saying this, that really can end you with one punch, and it's Lewis and it's Ngannou. There's just no one else really like that. And that's the reason, like with Lewis in some ways is like Dan Henderson, right? Like where it doesn't matter how old he is, the fact that he's got that threat of the knockout is always something that's gonna make his fights exciting. Like, he could knock out Chris Daukaus in this fight. He could knock out Ngannou. Like, we don't know because he's just such a power puncher. And again, like you look at the resume of who he's finished, it's pretty impressive overall. So I just think that Lewis absolutely has a puncher's chance in this fight. And again, I think a good comparable, like I said, is Dan Henderson there.
That is a perfect comparison, Dan Henderson, because you had to pretty much drag Dan Henderson out of the UFC, right? He was continuing to fight everybody. You remember when he fought Daniel Cormier?
And when I was going to say when Henderson fought Bisping in the rematch, he knocked Bisping down. Like, people forget that. And I remember I was in New Orleans at the time. I was traveling with my wife, and we watched that fight in a bar. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, is he going to do it here?" And he didn't, obviously, but it was a great fight.
Yeah, and also you mentioned that he has, two guys in the division, Francis Ngannou, Derrick Lewis, have the most power. And I remember talking to Chris about the power of Ngannou versus Lewis, and he told me, man, he thinks Lewis has just more pure power than Ngannou. So I think that that's something we should look out for in this matchup.
Absolutely. And by the way, before we talk about Chris Daukaus, As far as I know, I think there's only 2 people who've talked to Chris Daukaus ahead of this fight so far, and they happen to be the 2 people in this podcast right now. So again, this is one of the benefits of following us, is that we both are getting guys early on. We're trying to, because look, like, there's certain outlets, they have advantages in terms of access that we don't. So one of the ways we get ahead is we like to interview these fighters well in advance. And I know you talked to him right when the fight was announced. I talked to him shortly after, but Chris is someone I've known for a bit. And I think, again, a lot of fighters, they respect that when you're not just, hopping on the bandwagon now and doing the interview. It's, you've been doing it throughout the years. So if you guys want to watch those interviews, watch John's first, because I'm Canadian. I'll be polite here. And then you watch mine after that. That's how it works. Low Kick MMA is where mine is at. Okay. So we talked about Daukaus there, 5-fight win streak. Again, like, I didn't really know what to expect from him. He came from a pretty good promotion on the regional scene. And then I remember when he fought Parker Porter, kind of an easy fight in his debut in the sense that Parker Porter was a guy that was, considering retirement just, not that long ago, got the win in CES, got in the UFC. And then it wasn't really, I think, until the Nascimento fight, when he finished that fight in 45 seconds, people were kind of like, okay, this is a guy we got to pay attention to. And he fought Oleinik. Now, granted, Oleinik's been knocked out how many times? Plenty, including by Derrick Lewis. But still, that was great. And then, the fight after against Shamil, really good. But it's getting to the point now, or it's gotten to the point now with Chris Daukaus, where it's like, okay, we know what he's capable of. He's beating the guys that he's supposed to beat, but he's beating them impressively. That's where he gets to step up. Like, I've seen some people say maybe this is too soon for Chris Daukaus, but I don't think it is. I think in this division, you need to establish new contenders. And the 2 guys that everyone's been talking about as far as up-and-comers are Chris Daukaus and Tom Aspinall. And it just so happens that Daukaus gets this opportunity. I don't think Aspinall's far behind, but love the matchmaking here. And I love how they didn't put Aspinall and Daukaus together, because we don't need to see that. They've got 2 guys that they can build up on their own and sort of get it done as well. And there you go. There's the interview with Chris Daukaus here as well. Again, Mike on the ball here, our Vicente Luque lookalike producer, doing amazing work here over at the All-Star. So yeah, and then a couple things about Daukaus obviously is that he's very well rounded. Again, we talked about the 1 submission victory. He comes from a jiu-jitsu gym. Both him and his brother have a very good ground game. They don't have to use it that much because they're so good in other areas. Wrestling's on point. And here's another key thing, and I know he talked to you about this in the interview. He quit his job, like as a police officer. So that was something that he was doing earlier in his career. And now he's dedicating his entire time to being a fighter and just, not having the stress of, because I mean, we talked about the John Jones thing, and he was sort of telling me details of how he's had to deal with, similar situations in terms of domestic disputes and things like that. And the fact that you don't have that stress and you can just go into a fight, I think is a huge advantage for him. And the crazy thing is, John, like, Daukaus might even be better than we've seen him because he doesn't have that full-time job. And now he's going into this, and you even see it just physically. He's done a lot with conditioning as well. So a lot of positives here for Chris Daukaus. Just your thoughts on Chris Daukaus and what he brings here to the table.
Yeah, he's the new blood, man. And when you look at his resume, just in the UFC, it's like, what can this guy not do on the feet? And plus, he has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt on top of that he's been training for more than 10 years. I mean, we haven't even got to see an inch of that yet, right? So maybe possibly in this fight, I don't know. But with Chris Daukaus, man, if Cyril Gahn wasn't in the UFC and fighting at heavyweight and is a champion, I would think we'll be talking about Chris Daukaus kind of
exactly
that, you know what I mean? Because he's not the typical heavyweight. He's light on his feet, he moves well, he has fast hands compared to other heavyweights. And, he has a backup plan, which is that jiu-jitsu, right? I'm pretty sure he's well-versed in wrestling, too. I talked to his brother, and then Kyle was telling me that they both go to this local high school to wrestle all the boys.
I heard that, too.
High school team,
it's
right?
Pretty interesting.
That, right?
Yeah,
that's very interesting because, and he told me, like, the boys are big, too, in high school. You know how high school kids are nowadays. It's gigantic. So they're probably getting some good work in there. Chris Daukaus, the only thing that kind of, is kind of like, pops out to me is the level of competition. When you look at Shamil, he's not like the highest level. He was ranked, but he hadn't fought in like years. And Oleinik, he's pretty much, 1 foot out the door, right? He's not like, it doesn't seem like he's fighting to win. It's almost like he's fighting to survive. And most of the time he's not surviving. And Nascimento was a good win. Parker, he ran through Parker, man. But Parker showed in his next fight, he came back, right? And he won.
Yeah, he did.
I believe.
So
he
looked
it's
good.
Not like it's not like he's a can, right? So just the level of competition that kind of worries me heading into this matchup. But Daukaus is still younger and he's faster, and I think that will kind of level out what Derrick Lewis is going to bring.
I also think that you have the game plan of what not to do against Derrick Lewis, and that is what Curtis Blades did, which is, you can't have any little mistakes whatsoever. And I think with Daukaus' speed, his athleticism, everything, I think that's something he's not really going to have to worry about. That is another thing, though, that you pointed out is the level of opposition, of course. I mean, this is a huge step up for him. Derrick Lewis would destroy all of these opponents. In fact, he destroyed one of them in Olynyk. He beat Shamil as well. So there's a lot of common opponents here. But, one thing I always bring up in these breakdowns, and I do think it's something that's relevant here, is the pressure factor. Daukaus loses this fight, big deal. He's 32. That's, like I said, like being like 18 in any other division, because it's just such a young, an old man's division, so to speak. So, but with Lewis, if he loses this, I mean, obviously, I think even right now, the chances of him fighting for a title again are pretty slim. But I mean, from here on out, if he loses this, then we might be starting to talk about retirement with him. Really, I mean, depending on how this fight goes. I mean, if he loses a decision or whatever, that's one thing. But if he gets finished in this fight, I guess what I'm getting at here is that like this fight. I mean, Daukaus obviously has a huge opportunity to leap up, but there's so much time for him in the UFC. Like we're talking. I mean, what he has? 4 UFC fights. Lewis has way more than that. I remember when Lewis fought Matt Mitrione and got finished early on. This was years ago, like I think like 2015 or something, and. Daukaus just came in here. So it's like kind of what I'm getting at is that, for Lewis, a lot more is on the line here than Daukaus. Because like I said, if Daukaus loses this, and we've seen this before, where a fighter loses a key fight early on and then they come back and persevere. A fight that this kind of reminds me of a little bit as well, too, is like, Rory McDonald when he fought Carlos Condit. Rory McDonald ended up losing that fight. However, what Rory learned in that fight was that he needed to change some things up, and that forced him to go from Toshido MMA to TriStar. I'm not saying Daukaus is going to switch camps, but what I'm kind of saying is that we'll get a good gauge of where Daukaus is. Lewis can knock out anyone in the division. That's always going to be a threat. Daukaus knows that. He's got to be very careful about it. But we'll see if he can come up with a similar game plan like Cyril Gane did, which is just use your advantages, use your speed, use your athleticism, and see if he can go out there and get it done. So I think regardless of how this goes, it's going to be we're going to learn a lot about Chris Daukaus, and I don't think it's too soon. I think if you're finishing opponents as fast as he's been doing, as impressively as he's been doing, this is the right step up in my opinion. So I think this is totally warranted, because I know some people out there will be like, oh, it's a bit too much of a step up. I don't think it is. So any other things on Daukaus, or shall we get to our pick of this fight?
Well, I'd have to disagree with you on that. If Lewis loses, I don't think his career, or I don't think he would be talking about retirement, because there's so many fights for him in the heavyweight division. Think of Lewis versus Tai Tuivasa. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Think of Lewis versus.
What if Lewis gets finished, though? What if Lewis gets finished and we're talking?
It doesn't matter. I don't think Lewis
so?
steps away. I think Lewis is about the money. You know what I mean? He's buying cars and houses and four-wheelers, and you know what I mean? Like that costs money. He wants to feed that. So only way to feed that is to fight. And he gets a decent purse, man. It's not like he's getting like, $50K. He's getting 6 figures a fight. So if you're getting 6 figures a fight, I think you would continue, especially if the UFC likes you. So I don't think, people might say retirement, but I don't think he's thinking that in his mind.
No, not after this fight, but I think we're on that path to retirement. I brought up Dan Henderson earlier. What was the one thing that was very evident about Dan later in his career? He was slow. And that's similar with Lewis, right? Like same sort of thing. Like he's always been kind of a slower fighter, but he has that knockout power. But at some point you have the decline. And I'm just wondering, is this the fight where this happens, where Daukaus finishes him just like Cyril Gane? I mean, let's be honest here. That last fight against Cyril Gane, did you or I think that Cyril was going to finish him in this, what was it, second round or third? I can't remember what round it was. No, we thought it would be later in the fight, or it would be decision. Neither of those happened. So that's what I'm saying. Like, are we at this point? And Cyril's amazing, right? And I'm not taking anything away from that win, but just in my opinion, like if we see something similar here, if Daukaus goes out here and runs right through Lewis, that's what I mean. Like there's that risk of, are we at the point now with Lewis where he can't do it anymore? He can't get those knockouts. So we'll have to see what takes
before
place.
we make the picks, right? I just wanted to ask you one question. The Cyril Gane finish over Derrick Lewis, would you compare that to the Robbie Lawler finish over Nick Diaz?
Well, Nick basically was like, I'm good.
Yeah, but in a way, Lewis was like that too. He just didn't like put his hands up. He was just kind of like huddled in against the cage, right? And the ref came and stopped the fight. So it wasn't like he was fighting back, you know what I mean? And I don't know. I look at that and I think maybe he's close to retirement. I look at that now.
I think Nick, the Nick thing, I think so. I get what you're saying. I think the Nick thing's a little bit different, because even before going into that fight, you're like, this doesn't look like a guy who really wants to fight. Like, no, and I'm not saying that like he's scared or anything dumb like that. I'm just saying that like, I think Nick's just kind of like, this isn't for me. I'm kind of being forced into this, whatever. But yeah, I get what you're saying with that. All right, let's finally get to our pick here, and then we'll get to your questions. I know you, all of you are happily waiting to get your questions answered here. I'm going with the odds here. I'm going with Chris Daukaus. What it comes down to for me is that I think Chris Daukaus has multiple ways to win this fight. I think Derrick Lewis has one way to win this fight. I don't think you'll see a Derrick Lewis decision like against Ngannou. I don't think this is going to be a boring fight. I think you're going to see a pretty high-paced fight here. But I think with Daukaus's fight IQ, with his athleticism, his ground game, his wrestling, there's so many ways that Chris Daukaus can win this fight. And, you know, I get it. Like, he can always have the one-punch knockout. I think if you really wanted to be it safe here, you could play Daukaus straight up and then maybe do like a Lewis by knockout prop. Because I don't think if Lewis is going to win here, it's not going to be, I think, like a decision or submission. It will be by knockout. It will be him catching him. It'll be him going out like that. So maybe you look at that if you wanted to hedge it from a betting perspective. But right now, I think Daukaus is the real deal. I think he is as advertised. The level of competition does worry me, but he's also beating that competition quite handily here. So I'm going Chris Daukaus by finish. I'm going to go third round finish. I think Lewis tires out a little bit. I think Daukaus just sort of picks away at him a little bit and then goes in for the kill later on. I don't think it's going to be a quick finish, but I'll go third round knockout for Chris Daukaus. How are you picking this one?
When you look at Derrick Lewis, right, and all of his losses, Matt Mitrione, Sean Jordan, Mark Hunt, Cormier, Dos Santos, and Cyril Gane, right? What do most of those guys have in common? They're not, except for Mark Hunt, except for Mark Hunt. You take Mark Hunt out, most of those guys are very light on their feet.
Yeah.
That's a characteristic. Sean Jordan was very light on his feet. He head kicked him, spinning head kick, and knocked him out, right? Mitrione, same thing, very light, fast with his hands. And, you know, Cormier, I still feel like he was very light on his feet as a heavyweight too. And Dos Santos, you know, he could move when he was, you know, when he was in his prime. And then Gane, you know, he's just another breed of a heavyweight that just, you know, blows your mind. And I think Chris Daukaus is on his way to that. I think Chris Daukaus is on his way to kind of like, he's a little bit behind Cyril Gane, but he's catching up. He's, you know, he's working hard in the lab. His training partners are all heavyweights. I don't think people really know that. You know, I mean, in my last interview, he told me like he has a stable of heavyweights that train with him alongside his brother. And then he has a jiu-jitsu background, right? He can always go to the ground and submit you. I'm picking Chris Daukaus. The reason why is that a lot of the people that beat Derrick Lewis have the same characteristics as Chris Daukaus, and Chris Daukaus does have that power too. You know what I mean? And he's smart. Sometimes he'll hurt you and he'll step back. If you watch a couple of his sets, that's what he did. He hurt him and he stepped back to see like what was the reaction. Because you know what Derrick Lewis likes to do, right? He likes to get hit and act like he's hurt, and then when they come in, he throws the bombs at him, right? I think Chris Daukaus is too smart for that. And I think that he's going to be light on his feet. He's going to piece him up, you know, and I agree with you. It's going to be third round, fourth round, fifth round. That's where he's going to, you know, end up finishing the fight. Derrick Lewis is going to, hate to say that, but he's going to lose this fight, man. He's going to lose to Chris Daukaus, and Chris Daukaus is on his way to getting closer to that title. I think that Chris Daukaus is going to be one of those guys you're going to talk about in the middle of next year, fighting for that, you know, championship.
And I think it's inevitable that either Daukaus or Aspinall at some point is going to fight Curtis Blades, because he's kind of, or Volkov. Those are like the two guys that like are just like slowly, you know, it's like they either getting close to a title and they don't or whatever. But those are two guys I think in that division that are very, you know, very good. They're contenders, but these up and comers have got to face them at some point. So we'll see what happens. Okay, let's get to questions, everyone. Again, I want to remind everyone to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It's an easy way to support the channel. Basically, if you hit the like button, it just bumps us up on the YouTube pecking order and the recommended page and all that. So again, if we have, you know, however many hundred people watching this, make sure you click the button, because then, you know, we should have we should have 100 likes. Seriously, we should. I always tell people that. Okay. Happy birthday, Mr. JHK. I forgot to mention that. I'm so sorry. I saw that yesterday. How are you 42? What's your secret, John? Tell me. Is it moisturizer? Is it, do you not drink? Like what is your,
I'm not a drinker. I don't really drink.
I have this theory. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you here. I think the people that look the youngest are people who do not drink a lot of alcohol. And that's why I've kind of cut it. Like I drink here and there, but really not that much. Some other stuff I like, but other than that, that's not really my thing. Cause look, alcohol is if you want to age quickly, cigarettes and alcohol is one way to do it. So you're on the right path there. But anyways.
I think cigarettes and alcohol is probably the downfall of most people. So I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just lucky to be able to look young, but I probably look older in person. The cameras are just good to me, I guess.
I thought, honest to God, and I think I've told you this before, when I first met you or when we started talking or whatever, and just, I mean, I've known you for years online. I've never met you in person. That's going to change one of these days. But I thought you were like 25. I'm not even kidding. Like I was like, for sure you're younger than me. But you're older than me, so there we go. But anyways, happy birthday. Any plans for the birthday? Anything? Probably quiet time with your family or anything?
Yeah, my birthday is over. We went to dinner, just quietly. It's COVID, so it's not much you can really do, right?
What are the restrictions like over there? As we're gonna get to your
questions.
Not
really restricted. I went to to this nice restaurant, like right at the perfect time where there's not as many people for dinner, like right before dinner.
That's what you got to do. 5 o'clock dinner time for me. I know that's a little bit senior-ish, but that's what my wife and I did last Friday. Actually, we went out for dinner and it was great. Got a table, no problem. Went in there because it's not about the people; it's about you getting to spend time with your significant other. So there we go. Anyways, before this turns into like a TLC show, let's keep on with some MMA questions. Good morning, guys. Sorry I missed the last breakdown. Listen, Antoine, you never have to apologize. You can watch the replay. You can post your questions in the chat. You can hit us up on social media. We're always available. Do you guys think that Derrick could be a UFC Hall of Famer? A win here gives him the most knockouts in history, regardless of the division? Probably not. You got to win a title, or you got to do something really crazy to get in the Hall of Fame. Mind you, I have my own issues with the Hall of Fame. Like, I don't think Stephen Bonner should be in the Hall of Fame. I know he's part of, the fight that got the UFC on the map with Forrest Griffin and all that. But Bonner also cheated. He was a steroid user, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And it was not like a John Jones situation. It was like he repeatedly got busted, and it was, this was back when USADA wasn't even in. So you imagine what type of stuff he was on there. So no, I don't think he should be in. But could he get in? Possibly, because he's a fan favorite. So I don't know.
Remember when he fought Anderson? He was juiced to the tits, and then he
big
still
time. And he's
beat.
like, yeah, I know. Just shows you how good Anderson is.
Maybe Anderson was on it too.
Which is why Fedor should get recognized as one of the greatest of all time, because he fought all those guys in Pride and they were on everything under the sun. So that's something I always like pointing out. Did you guys see Derrick? Who do you guys see Derrick fighting next? Stipe said Ngannou or Jones. Also, happy birthday. So there you go. People giving, keep the birthday wishes coming here. My birthday's next month, so I'll be getting all these accolades. Who do you see Derrick fighting next? Well, if he wins, let me just have
Rosenstrike. I think whoever wins this fight's Rosenstrike.
Yeah, they do have the same manager. I don't know if that matters, but it's got to be Rosenstrike, I think. Although I think he'll get a fight booked here soon.
But if Chris Daukaus wins, I say he fights Stipe.
Does Stipe take that fight, though? That's what I'm saying. Now, okay, we talked about Lewis not taking this fight. I doubt Stipe fights one of those up-and-comers. I think he'd retire before he'd have to fight one of those guys. And it's not because he's scared. It's just he's like, what's the point here? I'm the greatest heavyweight of all time. Why do I have to be fighting this dangerous up-and-comer with really no upside to my resume?
Yeah, but...
I know. I get what you're saying, but...
It would suck to see him deny fights, you know what I mean? But if Stipe fights John Jones, then I guess that fight's not there for Daukaus. But then there's still, Volkov, he's still ranked higher than Daukaus. Rosenstrike. I think Volkov or Rosenstrike would probably be the
Volkov rematch should happen at some point. I mean, I was at that fight. That is if you want to give an example of a Hail Mary in football equivalent in MMA, that was it. 1 second left, he knocks him out. I mean, Volkov is going to win a decision. I think I even bet the Volkov decision prop, and then when that happened, I was like, no. So it makes up for the fact that a couple years prior, I bet the inside the distance on Demetrius Johnson against Horiguchi, and he finished him with like a second left or something. So that was just karma coming back to get me. Early prediction on Wonderboy versus Bilal. We should probably preview that fight. We will likely here soon. Just early pick, and we'll go into more detail when it comes up. Wonderboy. Wonderboy wins that.
I love Wonderboy.
I think people, and I mean no disrespect when I say this, I think people like Bilal a lot because of how he is on social media and stuff, and I think that blinds people to how good he is. And Bilal's he's a good, solid fighter. I think he beats a decent amount of guys in that division, but he doesn't do anything like outstanding. Like, he beat Maya in his last fight, but it wasn't the type of win where you're like, okay, he's really turned the corner here. Because not that long ago, he lost to Jeff Neal, and say what you want about Jeff. I mean, we'll see how he looks in his upcoming fight against Ponzinibbio. But I just think like Wonderboy, he lost decisively his last fight, but the guy he lost to, I think, is the changing of the guard. I don't think Bilal is that per se, but we'll see.
I think Bilal will beat 80% of the welterweights in the UFC. I just think that he's not good enough to beat Wonderboy right now. I still think Bilal, we haven't seen the best of him yet. You know what I mean? And we're going to see it maybe in a year from now, maybe 2. He'll still be in the UFC. I don't think he's going to go anywhere. It's just that Wonderboy is just too good right now, man. Even though Wonderboy lost his last fight, but still, the skill for skill, I just look at Wonderboy.
The striking,
just better.
I think it's going to be the difference. I still think Bilal, I've said this for years, I think he's a little undersized for the weight class. He's not a tall guy. It's not like a big, like stocky guy either. I do wonder if 55 would ever be in his future. Just thinking about it out loud, because like he's like, I think how old he's like 5. I've seen him in person a couple times. He's not like, I'm a lot bigger than he is. Not that I'm a welterweight, but still, it was just like, it's one of those things I've thought of, because I've seen guys like Wonder Boy and some of the other fighters in the division, and they just, they tower over him. I mean, we'll see how they look standing toe to toe, but we'll have to see how that looks. Prediction: Cody, Kai France. I think I've told you guys this before. I'm going France in this fight. Garbrandt, I don't know what Garbrandt we're getting. Granted, he lost to a guy in Rob Font in his last fight who's now fighting Aldo and has looked pretty good, but moving down a weight class as you get older typically does not go well. I know he doesn't cut a ton of weight. France is very good. I think he learned a lot from that Royval fight a few fights ago, but yeah, I'm going to take the guy who's been more of a mainstay in the weight class, and that's France. What about you?
Yeah, I talked to Cody one of his coaches, right? And he was saying that, Cody Garbrandt is not going to have any problems with the weight cut.
Yeah, I've heard that from teammates as well.
Yeah, he's so small. But I'm taking France too. And by the way, I'm interviewing France tomorrow, so look out for that in the next couple of days.
Speaking of interviews, got to give you a quick shout out. I'm getting Fiziev shortly after this, but you gave me a little tip yesterday, because we were both of us, I think, we're having trouble getting an interview with him, and just want to let you know that John's a really good guy when it comes to this stuff, and we do this every now and then, but we'll sort of talk shop when it comes to interviews. And I wish there was more in this industry. Everyone's out to get each other, but there's countless times where we'll all sort of help each other out. So just want to acknowledge that John's a really good guy when it comes to that stuff, and we'll always sort of compare notes. But that was good of you yesterday for letting me know about that. So now I'm going to be interviewing him at 12:30, so appreciate it. Supporting from London, keep up the hard work. Thank you very much. We love doing this. We love doing the show. London, yeah. Speaking of interviews, I might as well mention this. Are you getting Mokaev coming up here soon? Did you talk to?
Of course, man.
Yeah,
of course.
I am too. But let me tell you this. When I have to interview him because of the time change, I got to interview him tomorrow morning at 4:30 a.m. my time, because it's the only time he could do, because he's in Bahrain. But I'm like, I don't want to miss out on this. And I know he did aerial, but it's like, I got to interview this guy, right? So yeah, it's going to be a little bit earlier tomorrow, and my nights are later now.
I'm the opposite.
Yeah. So what time are you getting? But you probably
I get him at 6 p.m. So
okay. I was gonna say, like, what typically, like, you have probably bizarre hours for your interviews sometimes.
No, not with Bahrain and Middle East and Europe. Like, most of them are like.
What about the US though?
If I talk to them in the morning, then it's my evenings, and then the US is mornings, or my mornings are their evenings. So it kind of works out in that way. It's just South Africa, man. That place, the time is just weird.
Yeah, no, I know it's tough. I saw Daukaus working body shots on Instagram story. Those are useful weapons against Lewis. Great point. Daukaus can copy Gon's game plan. I think they're somewhat a bit, they're different fighters, but you can take some things away from how Gon won that fight. According to Kyle, the Lewis fight was offered when Chris was taking his victory pictures during UFC 266. That's right. I did hear about that. So there you go. They were in a rush.
Did you interview? Were you the one that interviewed Kyle?
I was. Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Were,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because I asked him about that, because it was during Kyle's fight week as well, right?
Exactly,
so,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of Kyle, man, feel for the guy. Talk about some bad luck with opponents and everything. It's just run of the mill.
Is it true that Holland's going down to 170? Is that true? I remember hearing that somewhere.
Who's going down to 170?
Kevin Holland.
Oh yeah, but he's fought at 170 before.
I know, but I would think that I don't know. He's pretty big, right? Like
he is very big. Yeah, I just think he doesn't cut a ton to get to 85, so he's gonna try it. But again, I always think it's better staying in your weight class. In Daukaus' defense, Olynyk gave Lewis and Spivak hard times while Daukaus KO'd him inside 2 minutes. Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I was pointing out as well. Who would you guys have in Daukaus versus Aspinall, regardless if Chris wins this matchup? Man, now we're picking hairs here. I mean.
Yeah. I'll take Daukaus.
I'd take Daukaus too, just because of activity a little bit. I feel like Aspinall's been a little bit inactive, but what are you going to do? Does Lewis have the power to change someone's career after a knockout?
Yes, I think so.
Well, I mean, who's he knocked out that hasn't been the same since that? I can't think of anyone. We'll see how Blades looked. I mean, he got a nice win in his last fight, but I don't think he's like, trying to think. I'd have to look in that a little bit further.
Travis Brown.
Yeah, well, Travis Brown, his mistake was going to Edmund. That was just a career killer. I think the loser of this matchup probably gets the winner of Tai versus Sakai, specifically if Tai wins. Thoughts? Yes, 100%.
Yeah, man.
What is up, my man? My Patreon here. How you doing, buddy? Sinister Story. I think Chris is going to get rocked, but he's going to come back after Lewis tires out from trying to get the finish, and Chris will work his Chris boxing and finish Lewis. I could see that happening too.
I don't know, man. I don't think Derrick Lewis throws to rock you. I think Derrick Lewis throws to just destroy you. So I don't know. His chin's gonna get tested, man. It's. Have you seen anybody like get rocked by Lewis? It's usually he just knocks them out, right?
Yeah, he Yeah, I'm trying to think. Nothing comes to mind. No.
Yeah, not many, right? So yeah, you got to be careful.
Gane is more versatile and probably faster than the Daukaus, but seems to find his opponent's chins easier. It's a good point. Very good point. Kevin, another one of my Patreons here, who's great when it comes to the injury side of things. Lewis is one of those fighters that has struggled with severe back pain. The issue seems particularly bad for heavyweights. We seem to have managed it well in training for his last few fights. Part of that was his weight. I know he sort of lost some weight to try and counteract that. But yeah, back problems are no joke. I mean, we've seen time and time again certain fighters. I mean, I think it was... I feel like there was a fighter who retired maybe a few years ago because of back issues. I can't remember exactly who it was, but yeah, anyways.
I do remember something like that happening.
It wasn't Kenny Florian, was it? No, I was trying to remember. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Is Lewis becoming a gatekeeper for these new heavyweights? I wouldn't call him a gatekeeper yet. If he loses this fight and then maybe loses another one, then yeah, maybe we can have that conversation. But I think right now with his power, he's still in the upper echelon.
Yeah, he's still like with that level of like Volkov, you know, kind of like those guys. He's still hanging around there.
Okay, this is the problem, and I'm not going to say I'm not going to single you out here, but this is the problem with the UFC sometimes is they make these narratives and people believe them. You're saying Ngannou should have fought Lewis in August. He was complaining about inactivity when he had the chance. He turned it down. No, that's not what happened. Ngannou wanted to fight in September. He had a trip planned after he won the title to go back to his home at Cameroon, right? He was in Dubai or something. I can't remember. It was some sort of trip. He also just won the title in, what was it, March? Yeah. And like the UFC's already, you have to defend in August because they wanted that Houston date. He's a heavyweight champion of the world. The UFC should not be forcing his hand after him winning the title. I mean, we've had champs be out far longer than that, including John Jones. So like
Dominic Cruz.
Yeah, Dominic Cruz. Like there's no, to me, it was completely reasonable if Ngannou wanted an extra month. This comes down to money. It's because Ngannou went out and said, hey, how come Jake Paul is making this money? Like I get all that, and it's more complicated than that, but that is false about him saying he turned down the Lewis fight because of whatever. It's because he had a trip planned. It wasn't that he like why would he rush to come back and take this fight when he's the champion? It should be the other way around. If you get an opportunity to fight for a title, you should be the one moving heaven and earth to make it happen, not the current champion. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because again, this is what happens. UFC, Dana will come out and say this stuff and fans eat it up, but those of us in the know exactly what's going on. Just look at Markel Martin as manager. He did a whole post on this on Instagram. Shout out to Markel. What weight divisions would you guys personally want to fight in, given your height and weight? Great question. Personally, I think I could do it. I'd probably fight 85. I'm about 200 pounds, 6 feet tall. I could use I could look to use some weight. I think 205 would be too. I think I'd be too small for the weight class because like I'm only 6 feet tall. But I'd have to go on a serious diet to get down to 185. I think because like I said, I'm hovering around 200. I think even on like a good strict diet, I'd probably get down to like 190 because I do I keep track of that stuff. I try and eat healthy. But yeah, I think 85 would probably be the ideal weight class for me. 170, I don't think is possible, but 185, I think. Back like in my 20s, I was about 185. What about you? What weight class would you be?
All right. So right now I weigh 85 kgs, which is 187 pounds, and I'm about 6 foot tall. So, man, I guess I have to fight welterweight. If I was going into a camp, right? If I went into the camp, I don't want to lose too much weight, so I would have to fight welterweight. But if I really, really like went on a strict diet, like a lot of these fighters would do, I'd probably have to go all the way down to lightweight, lose all that weight, you know what I mean, throughout the camp. But really, idealistically, I would want to fight at featherweight. With my weight and my frame, I think, I'm just, the COVID weight is on me. You know what I mean? If there was no COVID, I was like way lighter. So. But this is all hypothetical, man. Who gives a shit?
I don't know. Like a couple of years ago, I was like, okay, maybe I could get down to like back to 170, how I was like I said, like years ago. But I just think like, cause I eat pretty good during the week. And then, obviously on the weekends, actually right now I'm doing this whole thing for a month where I just don't have any dairy or wheat, just to, try and cleanse the palate, so to speak, just keeping everything kind of good. And even now, like I'm not losing weight like I used to. Let's put it that way. And I go to the gym almost every day. So it's, it's tough. But anyways, no one wants to hear about this. They want to hear about other stuff. Thoughts on the attention that Cody Durden has been getting? Yeah, you know what? I wanted to get your thoughts on this actually, as someone who is obviously Asian. Cody Durden's comments, because I talked about this on Monday. Someone obviously took it out of context and started coming after me when I said what I said. But I wanted to first get your thoughts, and I kind of want to get my thoughts on what he said and what I think he meant in terms of what he said. So,
well, when I first heard it, right, when I first heard him say that, I didn't think it was that bad. I just thought that he was just saying something that you could say about anything, you know what I mean? Or anybody, right? Go back to, to the suburbs. Is that offensive? No, right? So I was just like, maybe he slipped with the tongue. You know what I mean? Give him the benefit of the doubt. I try to give everybody benefit of the doubt, right? Because you know, you just people make mistakes. It could be a one-off. But then I saw people like posting his past tweets.
Yep.
And then I realized, no, Durden really fucked up right there, man. Because I don't know how you can support him after that. Like, how could you support a guy like that at all? You know what I mean? Like, he needs to come out and like address this. You know
well,
what I mean?
he
Like
did
his past
apologize.
tweets.
I just the problem with the apology was that he made it out like, oh, he didn't shake my hand and all this stuff, and that's where it's like, okay, that's not
like
really
he's
great.
blaming him. He you know for doing it.
So I'll tell you what I thought. And again, you know, I don't have much leg to stand on here, but I do know Cody quite well. I mean, I interviewed him long before he was in the UFC, so I have like a good understanding of him as well. My thoughts on it were that when he said it, I was like, can't say that in this day and age. You just can't. Like, you can't bring in, like, I know what he meant, but you still can't say it the way he said it. Okay, he fights a Canadian. He fights Malcolm Gordon, and he says, go back to Canada. No one's batting an eye. Nope. He says China, which is technically still a location, but it's because it's also a race that's where it becomes bad here. If he's saying, you know, some of the other horrible things you can say that we've heard that people have said towards Asians, then yeah, I'm on the same page there. As far as digging up the tweets, some of it was like rap lyrics. Some of it was like, I don't like that. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like people learn from their mistakes. We live in a different time now. I think that, you know, I not that I excuse anything that people do, but this idea that we got to go through their past tweets and see what this is really about, I don't like that shit. I think that's bullying personally. I think people get off on trying to be like, yeah, see, he is like the, you know what I mean? Like, knowing Cody the way I do, I think he meant it in the way of like, hey, go back to Canada, go back to Brazil. Like, no one's saying this like in that regard. I don't excuse it. What he said was bad. You can't say that in this day and age. That's kind of what my thoughts are on it. But I think what Cody needs to do is just do a video, don't do a tweet, because people will always, you can't defend yourself on Twitter. It's just, that's why I never argue with anyone on Twitter. It's a waste of time. You're never going to get your point across in the amount of characters that you're allowed to tweet. Do a video, come out and say, look, I'm sorry. He should reach out to his team, say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it as a race thing. You know, I'll learn from this. I'll try and do better, and leave it at that. And guess what? There's going to still be people who are upset, even if he does that. But you got to ignore those people, because they're not out with good intentions. The people who are out with good intentions are people who learn from their mistakes. Education is one of the things I wish we would see more people do. Instead of people saying, you're racist, all this stuff like that, educate them. Hey, this is why you can't say that. This is why in this day and age you can't do that. Nobody's doing that, because it's not about that. It's about, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm better than you. And that's what I don't like. And you know, that's all I'm going to say in it, because I feel like that's how our society has sort of gone these days. It's not about education and helping people improve. It's about, I'm better than you, and I don't like that. So
yeah, and I'm going to attack you for anything, any little bit and piece. Yeah. And I understand that. And
people deserve to be accountable, but it's the way, it's the angle of how they do it. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm all about education. I'm not about bullying people and trying to, you know, like how, you know, all this stuff. Like I saw it time and time again. When I saw a couple people on Twitter go through and find the past tweets, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you know, like, I don't know. It's just,
yeah, but to me, like, you know, a lot of people that are attacking him do have blinders on, and they're just focused on one thing, tunnel vision, and they just want to attack, not really understand the situation and understand Cody Durden. But those past tweets, man, like, there's a bunch of them. It's not just like,
well, I didn't. The only ones I saw were the rap lyrics ones. I didn't.
No, there's like some things about Chinese people too.
Okay, well, yeah, then that,
and even his opponent.
Even leading up. Okay.
Yeah, even leading up, and I didn't see that.
Look, if I'm Cody Durden's management, I think he's with first round. You know, you got to
address it, man. You got to come out and talk about it. You got to address everything.
You got to bring
it to the table.
Do a video. Come out, make sure. And this is I wish more management would be on top of the. Would kind of explain to him, look, this is what you got to do. You got to go out there and say this, and not saying it in like a fake way, but saying it as in like, look, like, I'm sincere. You know, because I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't, and I think he's just
yeah. From my interactions with him, he's been always good. You know, always polite. You know what I mean? Like, I'm Asian, and he's interviewing with me before the fight. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't think he has a problem. It's just, I feel like he needs to come out and address this and clear the table, clear the air, right? And I think a lot of people will understand that and respect that. And then there's always going to be the people that don't respect it and are just going to
no matter what you do, apology, whatever, and then they're going to hold it against them. And those people have issues, because it's like, if you know, someone like yourself is not is taking it a certain way, and like a white person is upset about it. It's like, who's really the victim here? You know what I mean? Like it's crazy. So anyways, we spent enough time on this. You know, I could see people even getting upset with what we said here, but that's, you know, look, I try and be honest with you guys as much as I can. All right. Hello guys. Dolidze is out. Allen faces Chris Curtis prediction. Okay. Can I tell you how much I hate this fight? And this was yesterday. I think Marcel or someone broke the news here. Okay, here's why I hate this fight. I like Chris Curtis and Brendan Allen a lot. Like, it has nothing to do with either of them. It has to do with the UFC's matchmaking. I know Brendan Allen wanted to fight. I get that. He's had a couple opponents fall out. You know, he's got another. He has a newborn, another child. You know, coming out. He needs the money. Well, doesn't need the money, but I'm sure the money would help, especially coming close to the holiday season. I get that. But like, why is he fighting Chris Curtis? Like, Brendan has zero to gain from that fight. Zero. Chris Curtis beat Phil Hawes. That was great. It was a circumstantial fight because of the fact that Daukaus also had his opponent out. Chris took advantage, got the win. Good for him. I'm not going to downplay Chris's performance or him getting the win. I think it's great. Chris was long overdue for a UFC shot here. But Brendan gains nothing from this fight. What happens if Brendan Allen loses? All that momentum he had from losing to Strickland and going on this win streak is evaporated over a guy that realistically didn't even deserve that fight. It's just, again, circumstance. You have all these guys off, you know, that you have signed to the roster that they're chomping at the bit for fights. You can't pull anyone out of there other than Daukaus. Like, or other than and Chris Curtis. We're saying Chris today. That's why I'm getting confused. Pull someone else if you can and bring them up and have them fight Allen that has more UFC fights. Curtis has one UFC fight. Brendan Allen has way more than that. It just doesn't seem fair to Brendan Allen. That's all I'm looking at. Like, if I'm Curtis, of course I'm going to take that fight. If I'm Allen, of course I want to get a paycheck and I want to actually fight and not be out of the fight. But I don't like this type of matchmaking. I think it's very short-sighted on the UFC's part. What do you think?
Yeah, career decisions, man. Career decisions. Chris Curtis, man, imagine he goes in there and knocks out Brendan Allen. That's back-to-back knocking off Phil Hawes, who's I feel like was a great prospect, and Brendan Allen, another like a little bit more further up in the rankings prospect. That pushes Chris Curtis, man, as like probably breakout fighter of the year, man. I don't know, like how many guys are breakout fighter of the year?
He'd be up there for sure. Yeah. The other tidbit, and I think Marcel was the one who mentioned this to me in the Discord chat on my Patreon. Who's going to be in the corner of Chris Curtis? Sean Strickland, who Brendan Allen hates. And like, I followed Brendan for a while, like, you know, dating back to, I think his like second or third pro fight. Like, I've never seen him get annoyed as much at a fighter as Sean Strickland. So, and I even brought him up again in our last interview, and I was just, you know, sort of basking, and he's like, I want to fight that guy again. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. As far as a pick, I mean, I have to pick Allen. He's the mainstay middleweight. He's actually picked up some really good wins. Phil Hawes been knocked out before, so it's not like it was like out of the possibility of Chris Curtis winning. I mean, I didn't expect him to win, but he did. But yeah, I would pick Allen in that fight. And just sort of last tidbit on this, you know, Brendan Allen doesn't have a manager. He left Sucker Punch. So he basically is making this decision on his own, which I get, but I don't know. I think this is where a manager could step in and say, look, like, dude, do you realize what you could be losing here? Like, you'd be losing a lot of momentum fighting a guy who's not ranked, who only has one fight. So that's just my thoughts on the fight personally. Early prediction on, I think you meant prediction, not participation, on Brandon Figgy 3. Don't see the belt changing once again. Rewatch the second belt. Yeah, I got Moreno in that fight too. The thing for me with Figueroa is the weight cut. Like, I know he's at a new camp at Fight Ready and all that, but I think that's just it's too much for him. He should fight at bantamweight, and I think Moreno's going to win again. So
yeah, I agree. I agree that the cut is going to be bad, and changing camps for a title fight, I think that's bad too. Look what happened to Zhang Wei Li. She changed camps and the result was the same. She lost the fight, right? I think it's going to happen. I think Brandon's going to keep the belt.
How's Hangman going to do at featherweight after so many years at lightweight? Yeah, I saw the test cut yesterday. John, I'll be honest, you know, I'm a big Dan Hooker guy, you know, like watching him fight. I think this is a bad move. He is a big guy. That's a lot of weight to cut. I know you're kind of in this limbo spot, but here's the thing. Like, he just lost to a guy that might be champion. Yeah. The guy he fought before that was a guy who did fight for the title. The guy he fought before that is fighting for the title in a couple weeks. Like, Dan, this is not the time to be making a switch, I don't think. Like, obviously the optics of it doesn't look good, like in terms of how many losses he's had over the last couple of fights, but anyone outside that top five, I think Dan's competitive. I do. Like, I think like there's a lot of guys in that weight class where I think Dan would have a good opportunity to do well. I don't think this is the right move right now. Again, I'm not a fighter, but I just think when you're cutting weight like that, like Dan is a big guy. I think welterweight might have even been a better move than going down. But your thoughts on that?
I don't think so. I don't think welterweight would have been a good move. I think the welterweights are just too big and they're killers up there. The power is just different. When Dan was cutting weight to 145, I don't think there was any science behind it, right? This time around, he's at the PI. He has a great dietitian and the fight dietitian. Shout out to Jordy, helping him and helping those two groups working together to get him down to 145 using science. I think it might be a good idea because there's a lot of great matchups for Dan. I think Dan, if he goes to 145, he could get a top 5 fight, top 10 fight immediately. Yeah. And there's a lot of great, like even I just tweeted something out with somebody was talking. Imagine Hooker versus Yair Rodriguez too. Right now, I think that's a great fight. You know what I mean? But I understand your concerns, though. Cutting weight is never good, and especially like the longevity. We don't know the science of like what are the side effects of it. As you get older, so it is concerning. But man, for a fan, I think it's a great move.
I have an interview that just got posted before we hopped on here with Colby Covington. And I asked him, and again, I had the benefit of getting to watch Submission Radio's interview ahead of time. So I was like, okay, what am I going to ask him that they didn't ask? Because no one likes watching an interviewer answering the same stuff. So one of the things they didn't ask him, and I know people have been asking me about, is would Cody consider a move to lightweight? Or Colby, not Cody. And he's like, no. He's like, he kind of made a joke about, I don't want to bully guys like Poirier is or whatever. But he actually like was serious for a second. And he's like, look, like, why would I, in the prime of my career, go down and deplete myself and make myself worse just to have a size advantage? He's like, it's not worth it. I'm staying at 170. I might even consider going to 85, but he basically said that like he doesn't see it as a benefit to him to go down. And I'm gonna have a clip on my channel of that soon, but he basically just said like, it's never happening. So for those who want to see him go down, because I know people are like, oh, he's not that big of a welterweight, but you got to look at like there's a lot of advantages for him being in that weight class at 170. So I mean there's one of the best out there saying he's not moving down, so just keep that in mind. Chris Daukaus, Walkout slowly becoming one of my favorite Fox on the Run. Walkout song. Yeah, I guess so. We already talked about Cody Durden. Came in late. Who did we pick? We both picked Daukaus. Do you think Font could clutch a decision or late finish against Aldo? Well, your better bet is to watch our preview show that we did a few weeks ago with Font and Aldo. The last card of the year has 3 heavyweight fights. There you go. So a lot going on in the division. I know it's the future. Yeah, I already talked about that. Why don't other organizations take advantage of dry period in UFC and have their cards? There's a reason the UFC is not doing cards. It's Thanksgiving. We got Christmas coming up. Plus, you got to make sure your employees aren't getting burnt out either, because it's not like there's no off season like every other sport. So I think it's kind of needed. I understand what you're saying, but I mean that was one of the issues with World Series of Fighting back when they were World Series of Fighting was why the hell are you doing a card on New Year's Eve in the States? Like Japan's one thing that's kind of like an iconic thing that and I know everything's the workforce is a little bit different down there, but in the US like their numbers were terrible. Like who's going to spend New Year's Eve watching a fight card? For the most part, like nobody. In person in the US, the cultures are different. That's what I'm getting at. Japan, different story, but there we go. Why don't other organizations sign the guys that don't get signed to Dana White Contender Series? They are. Bellator's picked up a few of them. Justin Gonzalez, Alison Vanderford. There's been others, I think. So yeah, it's not just. I mean, Aaron Jeffrey's a guy. If I'm Bellator, I'm snapping him up. Yeah, he lost. He's lost twice on Contender Series, but he's a good talent. You can build up. Good looking guy. Trains at a good camp. Like he's a guy you could build up in your division. Because guess what? Gegard Mousasi is not going to fight forever. In fact, I think he might be inching closer to retirement in a couple fights here. So you need some new blood in that middleweight division. A guy like Aaron Jeffrey, to me, would be a good pickup. So there we go. Who do you guys have in Nagano versus Gon? Again, that's a fight we're going to preview in a bit. I like Nagano in that fight.
Yeah, I think I like Gon in that fight.
Okay, well, there we go. So lots to talk about when that happens. What's the UFC going to do with Marlon Moraes? 3-fight skid, similar to Tony Ferguson. Yeah, it's too bad because Marlon had a pretty good performance against Merab Dvalishvili. It's just Merab is, I guess, like a tank and you can't finish him. So, I don't know what you do. I think he's in that kind of that spot where it's like, I mean, I don't know what you do. Like, does he fight? I don't know.
I heard Marlon might be going to another gym to train. Yeah.
Where?
I've heard some
watch him go to Vegas because that's where his manager is. They all go over there.
Maybe
Patchy Mix is there now too. I bet he goes to Vegas. So yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. I favor Kara, but would you say him and Cody's 50-50? Sure. I think that's fair. Is hypocrite that Dana could fire Durden but didn't say anything when Conor insulted Dagestan? But you said Dana could fire Durden. He didn't fire him. If you want to talk about an example of Dana being a hypocrite, Luis Pena busted for domestic violence twice. John Jones has had a litter of things, including a domestic violence allegation. Now, obviously, we got to let the law do its thing. But, I mean, Pena got released immediately, and Jones is still on the roster.
It goes back far.
Yeah, of course. Will Chope, yeah, that's another one, and that was something that happened years ago. It wasn't even something recent with the Will Chope thing. It was
I
like
don't even think
I think
he was like
I think it was Bloody Elbow actually who brought up an article, and then all of a sudden he's out of the UFC. So that was crazy. When are you posting the Colby interview? It's already up. I'll post it after this, but it's all my UFC interviews are on my playlist on my main channel, youtube.com/LynchOnSports. They're all on there, so you don't have to go looking for which outlet it is. I post it in the UFC interviews playlist. What's good, Jack? How you doing? I asked this question for you, James, but I'm curious his opinion on it. If you can change 3 fight outcomes, what would they be and why? Yeah, this is a great question yesterday from Sinister. Is there anyone that comes to mind? Fight outcomes that you'd like to see change?
The fight outcome that I would like to change is the Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping fight.
Oh, that's a great one. That's a great one. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. I wish Dan would have won the title and retired. That would have been just perfect because he was the double champ in Pride, and he won a tournament, I believe, like before he went over to Pride in the UFC. And if he would have ended his career, he's basically the Cinderella man of. And Dan Henderson is one of my favorite fighters of all time. That's why I wanted that fight so bad. Even though it didn't make sense. Remember, it didn't make any sense to have them fight each other because he was ranked like what, number 9 or something, number 10. But I don't know any other fights, man. I don't care. I don't really remember, but that fight just sticks to my mind.
Okay, we'll answer like 2 more questions here and then we'll get out of here. Who would you take in a hypothetical Sabatini versus Mitchell matchup? Great question. I do wonder with the injuries and the layoff for Bryce, if that's going to play a role in a fight. Like Pat Sabatini looked great. And by the way, I nailed that last week. The decision prop in that fight with Tucker Lutz was plus 120, so took advantage of that. Sabatini is one of these Philly guys that on that team, Petrosky and Brady and all them, they're looking great. I'd have to look at that one a little bit closer, but just off the top of my head, I kind of feel like Sabatini just because of the activity, but we'd have to see. We'd have to look at that one.
2 things that stick out about Sabatini, I think, is his athleticism. I think that he's just much more athletic than Mitchell. And the second thing is just like strength. I feel like he's much stronger than Mitchell. And on the ground, Sabatini is a monster too. Yeah,
I agree. Let's see what else we got going on here. Jack Tech says, I saw Bisping Hendo 2 live. If Hendo won, it would have ruined my night.
Oh yeah, that was in London, right?
Yeah, in the UK for that one. Okay, let's get just a few more questions here. If you guys want to post them. In the meantime, John, what do you got coming up this week, interview-wise? Anything interesting?
Oh man, let me see. Well, I got a bunch of interviews. Like I said, I got Kai Kara France, and Mohammed Makaev. He's the what is it? The star of the town. He hasn't even made his debut.
Did you interview him already, or are you going to interview him?
No, I'm going to interview him. But
yeah, you're probably interviewing him tomorrow, which would be my I'm interviewing. Yeah,
no, you're interviewed him before me because I'm in.
Oh, am I really? Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, well there you go. So
you got the first thing.
I was like, I got to do this, and I sent a note to them, and the management was like, just so you know, I'm getting up at 4:30 to do this, so just keep that in mind, the dedication here. So
well, I'm gonna watch yours, so I don't ask the same things you ask.
Yeah, well, I tried. Yeah, I went through a bit of what Ariel said yesterday because again, Ariel had him on before both of us, and picked up a few things, but there's a few other tidbits that I think I'll get into with him as well. Let's see. Do you think the UFC will be better or worse when Dana White retires? I think it depends who it is. I don't know. I honestly can't answer that. Depends who it is.
I think it will be the same. And I feel like the best person to take over would be Cormier. I don't know. It just seems like that they're grooming him to do it. For some reason, I just feel that way, that they're grooming him. But yeah.
What else do we got? Mokaev season. That's right. Oh, Ilya Topuria interview soon or late. I don't know. He's fighting on January 22nd. I think we can wait a bit for that one. Although, saying that there's going to be a bit of some downtime during the holidays, right? Because there isn't any UFC cards. So maybe that's a time where I could get ahead on stuff. We'll see. I had trouble getting him last time. So maybe it might be a good one to do a little bit earlier just because of the time change and all that. So
by the way,
it's not on him. Yeah.
By the way, we were like talking about how to say Rafael's name. His last name properly. I have a video of him saying his name, and he says Fiziev.
Fiziev, okay, that's good. Because I was gonna, you know what? I'm still gonna bring that up in the interview today because I want him to know that they're saying Fiziev on the broadcast, just so we clear it up. So there we go.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I also got an interview with Manel Cop, not Cape Cop. Yeah, this guy, he mentioned the prediction. Yeah, I got an interview. It's out right now on the All Star channel.
I'll just check it out. Can't interview him anymore. He went to the dark side for management.
Oh, really?
So yeah, he's with who. So I can't do any interviews. Otherwise, I'm gonna get an email or I'm gonna get a text message again saying I'm harassing their fighters. Or my favorite is you need to take the interview down.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Well, a little advice for people that if you're watching and you want to get into the media game, first off, go watch all of James's videos on how to do interviews and set it up and what you need to buy, because no one else is doing it, only James. Number two is interview guys before they go to the UFC. Manel Cave, I've known him for years. I met him in Phuket,
it doesn't matter. Well, but that's how bad things are. Jeremy Kennedy's fighting in Bellator. What is it?
I got to interview Jeremy Kennedy soon too.
I can't interview him because he's afraid to do an interview with me because his manager is going to get upset with him. How crazy is that? You pay a manager to help you, promote you, to book you fights, and he's afraid to do an interview with me. How insane is that? Jeremy Kennedy, a guy who probably could use a few more interviews, and it's not throwing shade on Jeremy, but it's like you need the exposure. But it's to the point of where, like, I even interviewed his coach and he was in the background and he's like, "Oh, I don't want to be on camera." It's like crazy. Like, I still talk to him all the time, but that's where we're at right now with that manager. So God. What a crazy guy. Anyways, as far as what I got going on this week, just quickly, Colby Covington interview, go check it out. Myself, Submission Radio, we're the only ones who got interviews with Colby as far as I know. So make sure you go look at that. And again, much different interview than Submission Radio. I watched the whole thing. I got tons of different stuff talking about Poirier, talking about John Jones, McGregor, all types of stuff. Again, possible move to middleweight, all those things. So check that out. That's on my UFC interviews playlist on my main channel. Talked to Adrian Yanez yesterday after his big win over Davey Grant. Jillian Robertson, talked to her as well. Got a couple other fun interviews booked today. I'll mention them because they're not, well, I already mentioned Fiziev. Also got Randy Costa, Lupi Godinez, Aaron Blanchfield, and then I'm going to be talking to Alex Morono tomorrow. I know you interviewed him, or I saw that in the back end anyways. You interviewed him. Sorry to spoil that. And then Kyle Prepelec, who I know you talked to beforehand. I didn't have a chance to speak to him, but Kyle ended up winning on the weekend, so I'll talk to him about that. And Mohamed Mokaev as well. So really excited for that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll be back here a week today. This is the new time slot. You can blame daylight savings time, so we'll be on here a little bit earlier. Exactly. Actually works a little bit better, because then I'm not having a rush to get my kid to school. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Hit us up on social media. He's at JHK MMA. I'm at Lynch on Sports. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.